The rain fell in relentless, gray sheets, turning the gleaming pavements of the financial district into treacherous mirrors. Elara's threadbare coat, once a proud possession of her mother's, was soaked through, offering little protection against the biting autumn chill. Each step was a careful, calculated misery. The problem wasn't just the water seeping through the thin leather of her shoes, it was the right one. The sole had begun to separate from the upper that very morning, a final, cruel joke from a universe that seemed to delight in her struggles. With every block that brought her closer to the monolithic glass tower of sterling dynamics, the flap of the torn sole made a soft, pathetic slap against the wet concrete. Her reflection in the building's immense revolving doors was a distorted portrait of desperation. She looked nothing like the confident, polished candidates she'd seen entering before her. Her hair, despite her best efforts, was frizzing in the humidity, and her suit, though clean and pressed, was visibly outdated. But her eyes, a steady, determined gray, held a fire that the rain could not extinguish. This interview was more than a job, it was a lifeline. It was the difference between keeping the roof over her and her ailing father's head and joining the countless others swallowed by the city's indifference. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate success, all polished marble, soaring ceilings, and the hushed whisper of ambition. The air smelled of expensive perfume and freshly brewed coffee. Elara's wet shoes left faint, damp marks on the immaculate floor as she made her way to the reception desk, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She signed in with a hand she hoped wasn't trembling and took a seat in the waiting area among the other candidates. They were a sea of sharp tailoring, designer handbags, and impeccably shod feet. Italian leather, sleek pumps, polished Oxfords, each pair spoke of privilege and preparation. Elara subtly tucked her right foot behind her left, but the damage was done. A woman in a crimson power suit glanced down, her nose wrinkling almost imperceptibly before she offered a condescending smile. A man across from her smirked, whispering something to his neighbor, who then also allowed his gaze to drop to Elara's feet. A hot flush of humiliation crept up her neck. She felt their silent laughter as keenly as a physical blow, a familiar sensation that took her back to schoolyard taunts and charity bins. She focused on the folder in her lap, her fingers tracing the edges of her resume, the proof of her mind, her worth, which no one here seemed interested in. They only saw the shoes. The elevator doors pinged open, a silent summons. One by one, the candidates were called for their preliminary interviews. Elara waited, a solitary island of frayed edges in a polished sea, praying her soul wouldn't choose that moment to fully detach and make her the complete punchline. Elara's first interview was a blur of focused intensity. She pushed the memory of the laughing eyes and her failing shoes to the deepest recesses of her mind. The HR manager, a man with a perfectly neutral expression, asked standard questions, and Elara answered with a clarity and depth that came from a life of having to be twice as good to get half as much. She spoke of logistics optimization, of innovative cost-saving strategies, of her night school degree earned after double shifts at the diner. The manager nodded, took notes, but his eyes remained unreadable. She left the room feeling like a cog that might almost fit, but knowing her exterior packaging had likely already doomed her. She was directed to a larger conference room for the next stage, a group assessment. 33 candidates remained, their numbers whittled down from hundreds. The room was a pressure cooker of competitive energy. As Elara entered, the same subtle glances descended upon her feet. A few stifled giggles were poorly concealed behind hands. She kept her head high, her posture rigid, finding a seat in the corner. The task was a complex business case study, how to salvage a failing product launch. While others scrambled to dominate the conversation, shouting half-formed ideas to be heard, Elara listened. She absorbed the problems her mind, honed by years of solving real-world crises with no budget, began connecting disparate threads. She noticed the arrogant candidate, Mr. Crimson Suit, proposing a wildly expensive marketing blitz. She saw the smirking man from the lobby suggesting massive layoffs to cut costs. Their solutions were textbook, brutal, and devoid of humanity. Elara finally spoke, her voice quiet but cutting through the noise. She proposed a grassroots, community-based rebrand, a partnership with local artisans, a focus on sustainability and story, a plan that required ingenuity, not just a massive checkbook. Her idea was met with dismissive smiles and eye rolls. Naive, someone muttered. Not scalable. She fell silent again, her contribution seemingly swallowed by the room's arrogance. Unknown to all of them, the entire proceeding was being observed. On the wall was a large, seemingly decorative mirror. Behind it, in a dimly lit room, Alistair Sterling, the CEO and founder of the company, watched the live feed. He had made a habit of observing the final stages of recruitment incognito. He disliked the polished performances meant for him and preferred to see the raw, unguarded character of candidates. He saw the preening, the posturing, the quickness to dismiss. And he saw the young woman in the worn suit and ruined shoes. He saw her initial humiliation, her subsequent focus, and her quiet, brilliant observation. He saw her offer a solution that was not just smart, but right, and he saw it be dismissed for its lack of financial brutality. A solution, he mused, that reflected the very values he had built his company upon, values he feared were being lost. He made a single note on a pad beside him, the one with the torn shoe. Bring her to me. Last a senior executive entered the conference room and announced that the field had been narrowed once more. Only 10 candidates would proceed to the final interview. A list of names was read. Mr. Crimson Suit was called. The smirking man was called. Others who had been vocally dominant were selected. Elara's name was not among them. The expected wave of defeat washed over her, cold and heavy. She had failed. She began gathering her things, her mind already racing to calculate which utility bill could be postponed, which part-time job she could pick up. Just as she stood, the executive cleared his throat. One moment. There is one final candidate. Elara Vance. Please remain. All eyes turned to her, now filled not with mockery, but with pure, unadulterated confusion and a dawning sense of threat. Why her? What special consideration did the charity case warrant? She was led not to another impersonal meeting room, but to the top floor, to the sanctum sanctorum itself, the CEO's office. The office was not what she expected. It was spacious, yes, with a breathtaking view of the stormy city, but it was warm. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with well-read volumes on history and philosophy, not just business. There were photographs of a younger Alistair Sterling building something in a dusty workshop, not posing in boardrooms. And there was the man himself. He wasn't a cold titan of industry. He was an older man with sharp, intelligent eyes that held a hint of kindness and the weariness of long experience. He stood up and gestured for her to sit in a comfortable chair opposite his desk. He didn't sit behind the imposing desk, but took the seat next to hers. He didn't ask about her qualifications. He didn't ask about her CV. Instead, he gestured to her shoes, the ruined, pathetic objects that had been the source of her deepest shame all day. Tell me about the shoes, Elara, he said, his voice calm and devoid of judgment. It was the last question she ever expected. For a moment, she was speechless, the carefully constructed narrative of her professional self crumbling. Then, something in his gaze gave her courage. It was an invitation to truth, not performance. Under the CEO's patient gaze, Elara's defenses dissolved. She told him the truth. The shoes weren't a fashion choice, they were a testament. She spoke of her father, a brilliant carpenter now slowly being stolen by early-onset dementia. She spoke of the medical bills that devoured their savings, of the small apartment that was all they had left. She spoke of working nights at a greasy spoon diner to make ends meet while studying for her degree by the light of a flickering lamp. The shoes were her only pair suitable for an interview. She had polished them until she could see her face in the scuffed leather, hoping it would be enough. The tear had happened on the walkover, a final, devastating stroke of bad luck. But she didn't stop there. She didn't ask for pity. She connected her story to the present. These shoes, she said, her voice growing stronger, taught me to see value where others see discard. They forced me to be resourceful. When the sole tore, my first thought wasn't embarrassment, but whether I could fix it with the strong adhesive my father uses for his woodworking. It's the same mindset I used in the group assessment. The others saw a failing product to be cut loose or bombarded with cash. I saw something with a foundation that could be mended, repurposed, and given a new story. A story people would believe in because it was true. She spoke of efficiency born not from spreadsheets, but from necessity. She talked about logistics from the perspective of someone who had to plan 3 bus routes to get across town because a taxi was an unthinkable luxury. She explained that true innovation isn't just about having resources, but about maximizing the potential of every single one you have, no matter how small. Alistair Sterling listened, utterly still. He wasn't hearing a tale of woe. He was hearing a blueprint of a formidable mind. He saw a person who understood resilience, who possessed an innate, ground-level understanding of value and cost, both financial and human. Her life was a masterclass in the very principles his company had been founded on: integrity, resourcefulness, and a deep understanding of the human element in business. She hadn't learned it from a textbook, she had lived it. Her broken shoes were not a symbol of her poverty, but a badge of her profound and hard-won confidence.